Cruise up and down South Bend and take stock of the road names. Write them down. Remember them. Look them up on a map. Leave the city. Escape the limits. More streets, more names, more to remember. Each one named after a local figure, a national hero, trees you've never heard of before, the odd British poet. The street names don't always seem like they have a lot in common, but they absolutely do. Look closer. It's been right in front of you the entire time. A lot of white men. How many white men? Probably it would be easier to tell you how many aren't named after white men. 5. We already covered Angela Street in episode 3, the only local road named after a woman. We'll get to Pokagon Street in episode 7, named after a Potawatomi tribal chief. And then there are the 3 we'll get to today, the 3 roads named after African Americans, although it would be more correct to say that each of them only got a small part of a road named after him. There are, of course, reasons for all of this. Roads were gridded and named during some wildly racist times, and it's not always an easy thing to change a road's name, even when you recognize that there are more valid histories worth honoring. Changing a road name causes problems with the post office, with the people who send and receive mail, with the people who make maps. In short, there have always been people who would support renaming roads to create a more representative grid of streets, right up until the government wants to touch their road. It creates a hassle. In 1933, the county undertook an effort to rename roads across the county grid. Itself an undertaking and a headache. There weren't enough people around then to bring the kind of political will to name a road after an African American. It would be another 72 years before that would happen. A small chunk of one road in 2000. What we have now is 3 African American men, their names adorning parts of 3 streets, covering in total less than a mile of the thousands of miles of roads that make up our map. So I say, the absolute least we can do is to tell their stories. Hello and welcome to A Bend in Time, presented by the History Museum in South Bend. I'm your host, Aaron Helman, and during this series, we're going for a drive around South Bend to tell the important, zany, strange, and unexpected tales behind just a few of its street names. During the course of this episode, you'll hear fictional advertisements for very real historical companies and products. We do that to help break up the podcast, provide some levity, to include just a little more history than we could otherwise, and to give you a sense of the time and place when and where all of this is happening. The absence of actual paid advertisements is made possible by the generous underwriting of all 8 episodes in the series by the Doug Hunt family. In this episode, we're running down the 3 parts of 3 streets that are named after African Americans in South Bend because each of them has a story that's bigger than the bit of roadway that's been allotted their name. We'll start on the west side with Alonzo Watson, a street you might never have noticed before. Alonzo Watson Drive picks up from Scott Street and goes south from Western for just about 900 feet, and then it turns into Scott Street again. His name is on, so far as I can tell, exactly 2 street signs, both hanging next to the stoplights at that intersection on Western. They did it this way because there's only one address on that section of road, and that meant there was also only one entity that would need to worry about an address change so long as Alonzo Watson Drive didn't exceed those 900 feet, the Housing Authority of South Bend's main office. Alonzo Watson was born in Arkansas in 1937, and he pursued an education that bounced him across the country. Bethune-Cookman in Daytona Beach, Wayne State in Detroit, and then a final stop at IUSB. It was here in South Bend where Watson put down roots and took a job as a chemist and a bacteriologist with the South Bend wastewater treatment plant. That's an important job, to be sure, but it's also not the kind of job we usually associate with traditional street naming honors. There was more to come. Within 2 years of his arrival in South Bend, Watson was already an influential figure within the South Bend Urban League, and the chemist was on his way to becoming a leader in and beyond the local African American community. By 1965, he was vice president of the Urban League and a member of the executive council for the Boy Scouts. But most of all, he spoke up for African American causes across South Bend. He helped lead the charge against a health spa that had discriminatory pricing tiers for African Americans. He spoke up when corporate interests threatened to disproportionately affect African American neighborhoods. By 1966, after a few years of fighting the system, he decided to change it from the inside out. It was December 11th of that year when the first want ads appeared in the paper offering equal opportunity homes. $50 and good credit would get you in the door. Call Alonzo Watson. In 1968, he resigned from his position at the wastewater treatment plant to focus full-time on fair housing. The city honored him then with a briefcase. The street name would come later. Watson was all in on fair housing. As a developer, he helped create subsidized housing at LaSalle Park and Miami Hill. He was chairman of South Bend's Human Rights Commission and joined other African American housing leaders on a 16-day European tour to learn about housing practices that were working well on the other side of the ocean. He was a trained chemist and bacteriologist. It seems like it should go without saying, but I'll say it anyway. Alonzo Watson was a brilliant man. In 1980, he found the job he'd been destined for, executive director of the South Bend Housing Authority. It was a big job. The South Bend Tribune was running complaints from readers about the housing authority the day after he started. It's one of the difficulties about a job like the one Watson had chosen. There was no perfect way to do it. But he did the job as perfectly as anyone could. Despite limited funds for seemingly unlimited needs and a waiting list that never seemed to get shorter, Alonzo Watson spent 15 years from 1980 to 1995, keeping more people in more homes than anyone else in the city probably ever had. That's worth a street name, and it's probably worth more than 900 feet of it. Watson's impact went beyond the building and filling of the homes he touched. He launched a housing university to help people gain adequate skills. He launched a youth sports program in conjunction with the police department. He shaped a cultural part of South Bend that so many others had turned their backs on. Alonzo Watson died in 1995, too young, just 58 years old. Alonzo Watson Drive was dedicated in the year 2000.
This weekend, catch a movie at the Scottsdale 6, located inside the Scottsdale Mall. We've got all the best flicks from the year 2000, including Any Given Sunday and Man on the Moon. Evening shows are just $1.50 and matinees are only $1 at the Scottsdale 6, where your popcorn and soft drink refills are always free. And now, back to A Bend in Time, presented by the History Museum.
It was 2005 when the city of South Bend first dedicated Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, but it's probably not where you're thinking. The first MLK Drive was not along a busy thoroughfare through downtown shooting past the Century Center and the new City Hall. No. The first iteration of the street name took over a small part of Chapin Street between Lincoln Way and Washington. That section of road has a different name now, but we'll get to that in a little bit. For now, let's stick with Dr. King. His is a known story, taught time and again in classrooms and history books. You don't need me to recount all of the details of his monumental life. But there's one story you might not have heard, one with a more local connection, one worth remembering. It was 1964, and Dr. King was speaking at a rally at Soldier Field in Chicago. Dr. King was a brilliant speaker and a brilliant strategist. He knew the importance of bringing people from different backgrounds together, all standing as one against racial injustice. So he called Father Hesburgh at the University of Notre Dame, asked him to join him at the rally. Hesburgh only had one question: "What time do you need me?" Hesburgh attended the event and stood on the stage with King as the rally wound down, joined hands with Dr. King at the end, and sung "We Shall Overcome." A never-identified photographer snapped a photo that became a famous symbol and went into the Smithsonian. It's a monument that South Bend has continued to remember. It was 2017 when a statue was installed in downtown South Bend, just outside what is now the YMCA, to commemorate that moment. The whole thing is larger than life, but just slightly. A 110% reproduction of that important moment, and a part of a continuing celebration of Dr. King's legacy in South Bend. Besides the statue, there's also the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Dream Center on South Bend's west side, rebuilt from the ground up and reopened in 2025. And then there's the street. City leaders took a little bit of flack for their decision to stick MLK Drive a little bit off the beaten path. Chapin Street isn't exactly the sticks, of course, but it's not exactly the kind of thoroughfare that you can't miss during a tour of South Bend. Perhaps it was that placing the street over there felt like the kind of move designed to placate a need to honor a man who earned it without causing too much of a kerfuffle. But Dr. King deserved a kerfuffle. Not a side street, but a big one. An important street, like the one that sweeps past the Century Center. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard was rechristened at its current location on MLK Day 2017. And for those of you keeping score, yes, it is the longest street name in the county. As for the stretch of road off of Chapin, formerly known as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, well, we'll get to that one after the break.
Get your appliances at Esslinger's, 2701 South Michigan Street, where only $328.88 puts a color TV in your home. It's like TV, but in color. With that color TV, you can turn your home into a theater with Zenith Solid State Circle Sound, just $188. All at Esslinger's, your satisfaction guaranteed. And now, back to A Bend in Time, presented by the History Museum.
I mentioned earlier that it can be a little bit of a hassle when a street gets its name changed. That's why there's so much opposition to it, even when people generally agree that one road's namesake is maybe not so worthy as another one who could stand in his place. It's why South Bend's earliest mayors have so many streets named after them, but the newest ones don't. We name streets when we build them, and then they tend to stay that way, often forgetting who they were named after in the first place, usually ignoring the ones who came later. If you regularly drove through a small and specific section of Chapin Street in 2005, the map of your commute changed just a little bit when that section was renamed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Drive, and then, when MLK Drive was relocated to the current MLK Boulevard, that chunk of street got another new name: Charles Martin Sr. Drive. The road isn't very long, less than half a mile before it runs out. It looks like there are 8 street signs with his name on it along the duration. But don't let any of that fool you. Ask anyone who knew Charles Martin, and they will tell you he was a giant. South Bend is filled today with hundreds of people who will tell you proudly that they owe him their lives and their legacies. Martin graduated from South Bend Central High School in 1963, and after 4 years at Ball State, he came back to South Bend, where he began to reshape the lives of young people almost immediately. He worked at the South Bend YMCA as a youth director and began touching lives almost immediately, pushing disadvantaged students to make the most of their education and to envision themselves leading a life that was different than where they were currently headed. In 1974, Martin was named one of the outstanding young men of America, one of 28 individual awards he would receive during his time at the YMCA. Martin sat with students, encouraged them to set goals, and helped them to refocus if they failed to reach those goals. Among those who knew him best, there were his handwritten notes, thousands of them every year to students across South Bend, many of whom would become educators, pastors, and civic leaders themselves. In 1990, the community arranged a thank you ceremony at the Century Center so that people could offer their appreciation to the man if they felt he'd helped change their lives. More than 700 people showed up. Charles Martin died too young, just 50 years old in 1994, but the impact of his life reached much further than the years he lived. His legacy lives on in a scholarship through the Community Foundation of St. Joseph County and through the thousands of students whose lives were changed for the better because Charles Martin was a part of it. It's worth the street name, but that's not all. There's also the Charles Martin Youth Center on Lincoln Way. You've probably heard of that one before. Across the street from the old YMCA, engraved into a rock near a bench overlooking the river, there's a kind epitaph you probably haven't seen before, but it's worth a look. Hey, thanks for joining us on A Bend in Time presented by the History Museum in South Bend. There's more history waiting for you at historymuseumsb.org. I'm your host, Aaron Helman. The theme music is Whose Distance Is It Anyway by Neil Carmichael. Thanks again to the Doug Hunt family for underwriting this episode and all 8 episodes in the series. In our next episode, we are going to remember some of the streets named after South Bend's Civil War figures. I hope you'll tune in for that one next. Until then, keep learning new things, and remember, everything is fascinating as long as you stay curious.